Hi, welcome on my channel, Aline's Visit. I'm Aline, a national guide, and today I am in Fontainebleau. Look at the castle behind me. I'm here to present you part of the castle because I would like to talk about a very important lady for French history. She was born in Italy, in Florence, in 1519, but she came in France and she became a queen. And she had 10 children, and 8 of them were born here in Fontainebleau Castle. So without further ado, let me present you Catherine of Medici. When Catherine of Medici arrived at Fontainebleau Castle as the daughter-in-law of the King Francis I, she was only 16 years old, and she measured the honor that the king had done to her. She was the only woman to be invited to this private hunting party. 2 years ago she was married to Henry, the second son of the king, but those 2 years had been very hard on her. Very quickly she found that her husband, that she loved at the first sight, was madly in love with another woman, 20 years older than him. Her rival, Diane de Poitiers, was from a French noble family. She was considered as the most beautiful woman in the French kingdom. How Catherine could win against her? Catherine was the heiress of the Medici family, very rich merchants and bankers in Florence, Italy. She knew that at the court in the Louvre, behind her back, everyone called her the banker. She was not of noble extraction, but since Henry was not supposed to reign, like his older brother, the marriage was accepted because she brought to the French kingdom a rich network of diplomatic and financial alliances. The King Francis very quickly appreciated her for her artistic education, a capacity to appreciate arts. After all, she was from one of the biggest family of patrons, and she knew how to ride a horse, unlike all the other ladies of court. She brought from Italy a saddle allowing her to ride a horse like an Amazon. She was wearing some trousers under her dress. And most of all, she was not trying to impress anyone. She was just enjoying the ride. Francis I did appreciate that she was not complaining about the fact that Henry was not enjoying her company. She was neither trying to compete with the royal mistress, Anne, the Duchess of Étampes, unlike Diane de Poitiers. At the contrary, Catherine was nice with both of those flamboyant ladies, always ready to calm the fire between them. She knew better than taking a side. Her diplomacy, a capacity to always find a way to establish the balance, will be later in history the grievance for which she was reproached by historians. As she tried to find her place in this royal family, she enjoyed more and more the Fontainebleau Castle, far away from the intrigues of the Louvre. She would have loved to stay there all her life for 2 reasons. One, the king did her the honor of asking her opinion about the fresco and stucco program that the Italian painter Rosso Fiorentino, invited by the king, suggested for the gallery that Francis commissioned. Immensely flattered, she tried to live up to this royal confidence, asking regularly news about the progress of this work. And the second reason was that at Fontainebleau, the king enjoyed greatly the innovations she proposed at the royal table, like the use of the fork, unknown up to her arrival. The new taste of vegetables like artichoke, broccoli, green peas, never tasted by the royal palate, but also the sweet almond treats like the macaron, the massepain, and the sorbet ice cream. A bon vivant like Francis could not disapprove of such innovations. When the news of the death of Francis II, the heir of the throne, reached her ears, reality struck Catherine. Henry, her husband, would be the next king, and she would be Queen of France. Now, the fact that she had not given birth to a child yet, after 3 years of marriage, was an issue. Her first duty as a queen was to give birth to the next generation. She would submit herself to any diets, medical advice, good wives' remedies from all the ladies of the court that appreciate her or just wanted to be in good term with the future queen. And then began the legend of the queen surrounded by apothecaries using mysterious potion or maybe poisoned to reach her goal. The rumor was growing and the pressure on Catherine was extreme. While the court was whispering that she should be repudiated for her sterility, strangely, Diane de Poitiers showed some concerns. She suggested the royal couple to be examined to be sure of the sterility of Catherine. And in fact, the problem was coming from Henry. Jean Fernel, the royal physicist, found that it was related to a physiologic issue of Henry. I will say no more, but if you come to France for one of my tours, I may be able to reveal to you some private secrets about our kings. Finally, at 24 years old, Catherine was giving birth to her first child. His name was Francis. Francis II was baptized in front of the entire court. Catherine, concerned about the dynasty, imposed a flamboyant ceremony. The records evoke children singing in Italian, recalling her Florentine origins. But Henry decided that Catherine was not fit to take care of the baby. He ordered the infant to be sent to the apartment of Diane de Poitiers. She would be in charge of the royal child, regardless of Catherine's feelings. During 10 years, Catherine was pregnant quite every year, giving birth in Fontainebleau, far from the fetid atmosphere of the Louvre. She had 4 boys and 3 girls, but each time the heartbreaking separation occurred. A child was removed from her lap to be delivered to a rival, supposedly more suitable for the education of the royal family. And the fact that Francis died in 1547 changed nothing. Consequently, Henry was the new king, Henry II, and Catherine was the new queen. But she was deprived of her child after each birth. Catherine had to rely on numerous portraits commissioned to François Clouet, a French painter, to be able to follow the evolution of her children. She only had few occasions to see them, and the bond with them was really difficult to create. Henry II created an emblem in order to mark his contribution to the buildings he commissioned. At first glance, the symbol appears to be 2 interwoven C's overlapping to form an H, a notation of the reign of King Henry II and his Queen Catherine. However, Henry II encrypted a sort of double sense in his mark. It also can be interpreted as 2 interlaced D's, with a line through the middle forming an H. Completed during the reign of Henry II and Catherine of Medici, the ballroom of Fontainebleau Castle is a remarkable example of Renaissance architecture. Il Primaticcio created frescoes depicting mythological scenes, reinforcing the festive and cultural atmosphere at the place. But one will notice the omnipresence of the figure of Diana, the goddess of hunting, very conveniently. What a no so subtle homage to the rival of Catherine. When Henry was mortally wounded during a tournament in Paris at his daughter's wedding in July 1559, Catherine was 40 years old, and the situation evolved very quickly. He died after 6 days of torment. She became the regent of France, and the legend of the Black Widow was born because she refused to wear white like all the previous widowed queens before her. She would wear black for the rest of her life. To take revenge of Diane de Poitiers and satisfy the black legend spread by her foes, Catherine could have probably found a way to eliminate her rival physically. But Catherine was wiser than that. She simply requested Diana to give back all the jewels and the lavish dresses that Henry offered her. She took back the deeds of Fontainebleau Castle, present of Henry to Diana, and Diana was forbidden to stay in Paris and to appear at the court. The social death of Diana de Poitiers was a far more effective vengeance. Catherine of Medici continued the architectural creation at Fontainebleau, including the completion of the Belle Cheminée wing. This extension illustrated her commitment to perpetuating the improvement of Francis I and enriching the artistic heritage of Fontainebleau. Francis II, Catherine's first son, was married to Mary Stuart of Scotland, and at 16 years old was considered old enough to govern France. His uncle, Francis Duke of Guise, had a great influence on him. Catherine would stay as his advisor, but the Duke of Guise tried to erase her peaceful influence facing the religious turmoil in the kingdom. Religious and political confrontations were also played out on paper. Encouraged by the rising of the printing press, pamphlet placards saturate opinions, reaching every level of the society. This intense war of minds made it the first media conflict in history. And Catherine was very often the victim of those pamphlets. The death of Francis II on December 5, 1560, placed his brother, Charles IX, who was still a minor, on the throne, opening a period of regency for Catherine of Medici, marked by a policy of dialogue between the parties. But all her attempts at conciliation between Catholics and Protestants failed. Facing those turmoil, Catherine would deploy active diplomacy with foreign courts beyond religious denomination. In February-March 1564, Catherine of Medici organized grandiose festivities in Fontainebleau, mixing ballets, masquerades, and mythological shows. These events were intended to dazzle the court and promote a policy of religious tolerance, while strengthening the unity of the royal family. She organized a long tour of France that she planned to present France to the young Charles IX. They left Fontainebleau for a 2-year trip from 1564 to 1566. This travel validated the new policy of religious pacification and the restoration of public order ratified by the Edict of Amboise, 1563, which put an end to the First War of Religion. This tour of France is the occasion for great festivities illustrating chivalry culture, feasts, balls, masquerades, and tournaments. Catherine excelled at organizing such festivities. She mobilized the women around her, including her daughters, Elizabeth of Valois and Margaret of France, to strengthen the authority of Charles IX. This woman played a diplomatic role by meeting with local elites and easing religious tension, exemplifying Catherine's strategy of using family dynamics to stabilize royal power. But unfortunately, the Second Religious War began in 1567 in the city of Nîmes in the south of France, when Catholics were massacred by Protestants. Matrimonial projects involving the royal children were one aspect of Catherine's foreign policy to pacify the kingdom. Wishing for peace, she had planned royal marriage for her daughters in order to have influence in the neighboring kingdoms. As for Margaret, called Margot, before her wedding and even after, she was rebellious, and the conflict between mother and daughter made Catherine intractable, because she considered that her daughter led a deprived life, unworthy of her rank. So Catherine decided her marriage to Henry of Navarre, chief of the Protestant party, to seal the peace in 1572. But the terrible decision of her son, Charles IX, to regain power over the country under the advice of the Guise family led to the tragedy of the St. Bartholomew's Day, the second day after the wedding of Margaret and Henry of Navarre. Pamphlets tried to put the blame on Catherine, feeding the Black Widow legend. Later historians followed this trend, easily forgetting that her son was in power and the one to decide, in an attempt to emancipate himself from his mother's influence. A few weeks after the Protestants' massacre, rumor spread that Catherine was thinking cancelling Margaret's union, which was considered politically disastrous from the Catholic point of view. Allegedly, Catherine summoned her daughter to the Francis I Gallery in Fontainebleau and offered to officially break off the marriage. Margaret, faithful to her rank, replied that she had consummated the union, and in all respects was now Madame de Navarre, making any annulment impossible without raising a huge dynastic scandal. Charles IX, responsible of this terrible and fatal decision of murdering all the Protestants, will be haunted for the rest of his days by the terrible image of the massacre in Paris and in the rest of France. And Catherine assisted powerless to the slow decline of her son, physically and mentally, up to his death in 1574. She already buried 2 sons. Any other woman would have been emotionally and spiritually broken. But she had not fought so hard to give the heirs to the Valois dynasty for nothing. On one hand, she fought against the Guise family, radical Catholics who wanted to take power over the Valois house. And on the other hand, she tried to control the ardor of Protestants, despite all the criticism and backbiting. She considered herself as the guardian and the protector of the Valois dynasty, her children. She had to ask her 3rd son, Henry III, in Poland at that time, to come back to France. Henry III was an adult and not particularly eager to take over the French throne, since the kingdom was still torn apart by those religious wars. It took 6 months to arrive to Paris after a long stay in Italy. As soon as he came back, he invited Catherine to step down of her role of advisor. She agreed easily, mainly because her daughter, Claude de Lorraine, had just died, leaving behind her a little girl, Christine of Lorraine. When her mother died in February 1575, Christine, then 9 years old, was entrusted to her grandmother. Catherine installed her in the Queen Mother's house in Fontainebleau. The usually very reserved young girl later remembered taking part alongside with her grandmother in royal hunts in the forest of Fontainebleau, where Catherine taught her how to recognize birds and how to steer a carriage, a testimony to the sincere affection and educational concern that Christine enjoyed immensely. Catherine arranged Christine's marriage to Ferdinando de Medici, Grand Duke of Tuscany, in 1589 in Fontainebleau. This marriage strengthened the ties between France and Tuscany. As civil war flared again, Catherine wrote urgently to Henry of Navarre, still a Protestant prince, though increasingly courted by both sides, imploring him to lay down arms and aid the crown unity. She dispatched her letters from Fontainebleau in December 1588, just weeks before her own death, on January 5th, 1589, and they reached Henry after her passing. According to Sully, the Prime Minister, upon learning of her death, Henry, future Henry IV, after the death of Henry III, who admired her politically acumen despite their clashes, lamented, "I have lost my most formidable adversary, and alas, my most formidable benefactress." For 30 years, despite the pressure of parties of foreign interference, Catherine tried to keep the peace and the unity of French kingdom. Let's remember this great lady, patron of French artists. Now, I hope that you will remember Catherine of Medici, not as the Black Widow, but as the courageous woman who fight for her country and for her family. If you enjoyed this portrait, give me a thumbs up, subscribe this channel, and as always, see you next time.